Welcome to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann, the podcast where entrepreneurs, business leaders, and HR professionals share tips, strategies, and trends in their area of expertise. They also talk about their successes and struggles along their career and business journey. If you love to learn through storytelling and find people fascinating, join us. Welcome back to another episode of Rev Up Your Potential. My guest today is Joanna Kervin. She is Crosslinx Transit Solutions Vice President of External Approvals and Implementation, and I'll get her to explain that to you later. Joanna Careers expands a unique series of career moves, from being an engineering consultant to the City of Toronto planning, to Toronto Transit Commission, TTC subway, to construction with Crosslinx Solutions, which I just mentioned. She graduated from the University of Waterloo with a degree in civil engineering. And I'm going to get her to share some of these interesting experiences she's had both in the private and the public sector. Welcome, Joanna.
So good to be here and talk to you, Hilda. It's a real treat to be able to share some of my career and my experiences with you.
Good. So let's start first with explaining what this Crosslinx Transit is for those who don't know, and then go into your career right from that beginning and starting off as an engineering consultant.
Sure. So Crosslinx Transit Solutions is a consortium that was created to build the Eglinton Crosstown LRT transit line in Toronto. Crosslinx is a consortium of four big Canadian companies: Cont, Ellis Don, SNC-Lavalin, and Dragados. So those four companies banded together, and we're doing the design, build, finance, and maintain for the Eglinton line. So as far as my career has spanned,
and your role there before you go.
My role at Crosslinx Transit Solutions, I'm the Vice President of External Approvals and Implementation. It's a fancy title for a lot of the work that I do behind the scenes to keep the project moving forward. My role involves everything from ensuring proper traffic management, environmental compliance, getting all the approvals from every external authority who has jurisdiction. My team is also responsible for all the property management and for closeout with TTC, Go Transit, and the City of Toronto. So pretty broad range of work that I have to do. And trust me, it takes all of the skills that I've developed over my career to be able to handle all of those diverse portfolios.
In other words, your experience in your career has helped you be good at what you're doing today.
Without a doubt. And really, honestly, I think the fact that I've changed career paths over the 30 plus years that I've been in engineering and transportation fields has really been what's been critical for me to be on this massive multi-billion-dollar transit project. And I have to say, I never imagined when I started out as a consulting engineer, I was a traffic engineer. That was my field. And that's what I did for the first almost 15 years of my career, was in traffic engineering and transportation planning. So I really enjoyed it. I learned so much right off the bat. I worked for two different engineering consulting firms. Had wonderful bosses, one of whom, of course, is your husband, Tyrone, and really had incredible mentorship from both him and my other boss at the other consulting firm. And of course, I had a family, and there was a point in time when a former client of mine actually reached out to me. And he was a director at the City of Toronto and said, I have a position that I think you would be just fantastic for. Would you be interested? So it just so happened my kids were young, and I was looking for something maybe a little bit more 9 to 5. that was a bit of a surprise that it wasn't 9 to 5. But anyway, I'll get into that. And then, so then I did. I joined the City of Toronto in the planning department doing transit planning for the City of Toronto. And it gave me a view of a completely different world, and got me immersed in a lot of politics. Obviously, the transit file was very, very hot when I joined the city. A lot going on, lots of tests of the official plan, transit strategies. So it really gave me a very different picture of what was going on. And I was also really lucky to have a boss who really saw a lot of potential in me at the time. And he really supported me in a lot of the career development opportunities that the city offered, getting me involved in some really big files. So really got an incredible amount of experience there in policy development as well, doing a lot of public consultations with the community, different communities. I got a huge education just while I was there. And as it happened, I was working on a planning study for a big subway expansion. And I got involved in that exercise as part of the city, as one of the city leads on it. And ended up getting involved in the funding negotiations to get federal and provincial funding. Again, nothing I would have expected to be involved with. Interestingly enough, we got the funding, and then I got a call from TTC, from the project director, to say, you know, you've had a lot of great history on this project. Would you like to join this project? Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And so all of the experience that I'd had as a consultant, in the planning division, being involved in all the funding negotiations, that allowed me to get into actual project delivery, which I never would have expected. And I hesitated. I mean, the funny part of that whole thing was I hesitated. I wasn't sure I had all the skills required. And as it turned out, I had a great advisor at the City of Toronto, and I went to talk to her, and I said, you know, they called me about this job, and I'm not sure. I don't know if I have the skills. And all she said to me was, what are you waiting for?
Wow. Wow.
It was a real revelation to me, and it was a really thought-provoking statement, because I had so much uncertainty about whether or not I had the skills. And she just said, go for it.
Did that give you the confidence when she said that?
It did. It really did.
It's so helpful when others support and uplift us, right? I remember I was a manager in ICU, CCU, and I was getting my evaluation, and my manager, my director of nursing, says to me, so if you're asking me if you're ready to become a director, the answer is yes. And I'm going, I wasn't even asking that question. And you believe in me? You think I can do that? You think I can be a director of managers? Like, so sometimes we don't see it in ourselves, right? And it takes somebody else to kind of give us that confidence to say, I see it in you. You go for it. So cool.
Exactly.
Cool.
And it was interesting because after that, I had been trying to be seconded. So I had spent a lot of, I spent 7 years by that point with the city. And I really felt there was a lot of great things to do at the city. So I didn't really want to leave. So I ended up talking to the city manager. I actually went all the way up to the city manager to say, I don't really want to leave the city, but I really do want this opportunity. Could I get seconded to the project? And he said, look, I know what your skills are. I know what your capabilities are. If you go to that project, you're not coming back. And I thought, wow, okay. It really, again, it kind of took me aback that somebody at that level could see my capabilities and my skills in a way that I didn't see. And so I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I'm going for it.
Good.
I'm going to take the leap
Well,
and go.
I mean, you made reference to the fact that one of your first engineering consulting bosses was my husband. So yes, we will admit that I know Joanna from way back when. And Joanna, I saw that in you. I saw that in you as that student who graduated and joined Tyrone. I saw that ability for you to understand things and even your people skills at that time. I saw that potential of growth, and as your career has progressed, I know that other people saw what I saw, and more so because you had many more experiences after that. So cool.
Yeah, it really was a real eye-opener for me to step into a role on such a massive project. It was so big and so complicated, and I think it was probably just as well that I didn't know that much about it and how complicated it was going to get over the next 9 years. So that was 9 years of being on that job and getting it open.
Did it ever get to a point where you were just tired of, oh God, 9 years, like I'm done kind of thing?
No, it's funny because I was asked that partway through, actually by a number of people. I was asked, "Aren't you bored? Isn't it just too much and it's too long?" And I said, "Okay, but hold on a second. We're building 6 $200 million stations. So all individual projects. So each one of them is a unique project in and of itself. By the way, those 6 $200 million stations are all connected by all the tunnels, and then there's all the other facilities that go along with it." I said, "There's nothing to get bored about. It's really complicated, and it's really interesting." Yeah. And I made a point though of really getting to understand a lot of the stages of the work because it was all new to me. Yeah. So I made a point of being out on site when the tunneling was going on. I made a point of being on site as the stations were getting built and getting familiar with a lot of the construction methods that were being used. I was out there when the first train crossed over from the original TTC line into this new line. I was on the train. I was part of the testing and commissioning crew. I didn't do a whole lot other than take pictures and put them on Twitter, but that was okay. But I learned so much, and the teams were fantastic. They really welcomed me as part of that exercise. So but I learned
again. You're saying I didn't do much, but you ensured that all of this was being coordinated and following through, and as you say, the external supports and yeah. So it's not just taking pictures.
And taking pictures, but also giving the public a view inside that they would never see any other way. Yeah. And that was really important to me because we were building this for the community. So the community, I thought, really had an interest in seeing what we were doing and how it was progressing and some of the cool stuff that, the engineering and transit nerd in me thought was really interesting. So I really had a lot. I felt a lot of ownership of that particular project because I'd seen it right from the very beginning and right to the end.
Did you always want to be in transportation? Like you got your degree in civil engineering, and civil engineering has many, many specialties in it. You chose, your first job was in transportation or traffic to be specific if we want to drill down into its minor components. Is that what you always wanted to do, or did you just?
So it just so happened that my very first job, so I went to the University of Waterloo, which is all co-op for engineering. And I just so happened to have my very first co-op job with Transport Canada in airport planning.
Oh, the GTAA project.
Well, it was across Canada. So the Canadian government owned all of the airports in Canada at that time. So I got to meet a lot of really young engineers who were incredibly generous with me and gave me some insights into the transportation world. I mean, this was airports, but into the transportation world in general. And I really was fascinated by it right from the very beginning. And my subsequent work terms were actually with municipal government. So I worked for the City of Waterloo, building roads for new subdivisions as a surveying assistant, and then I was working for the City of Toronto, or Metro Toronto at the time, doing traffic engineering stuff. So I got exposure to it really early on, and I quite enjoyed it. So it wasn't a surprise they ended up in consulting, because I had a lot of skills that could be readily used. And so that's where I ended up, and I've loved it. And I've had so many different experiences throughout my career, and it's kept it interesting. And I think that's why the changes from private sector to public sector to another public sector, a big transit agency, big project, and now I'm back in the private sector. Yes. So it's just kept things interesting. It's challenged me every single step along the way, and that's, for me, that's very appealing, and that's my personality, I think.
Now you're in a career that is male dominated, and you have progressed to a senior level in a private sector role now. Can you talk about women and leadership in an area where you are not the dominant gender? What kind of experiences can you share with us?
It's been an interesting experience to go through. To go through the different stages in my career, often being the only woman in the room, and I think my upbringing had a lot to do with my ability to not really be overly concerned about the fact that I was the only woman in the room. Mm-hmm. My father and my grandfathers were, I think, for their generations, incredibly progressive, and I was a bit of a what they called back then the tomboy. I wanted to play with trucks and cars, and I liked to build things, and I liked to read popular mechanics magazines and all of these kinds of things that were not necessarily considered to be really typical things for a young girl to do. But none of them made me feel like I was unusual, strange, or that I shouldn't be doing those things. So they gave me a sense of confidence about being interested in engineering and science and building right from the time I was quite young. And that matters. It really, really matters. And it really mattered to me. So when I ended up in an environment like engineering, whether it was at school or in my career, I've really not had a lot of overt sexism. Mm-hmm. There's been more more subtle sexism that's been in the room, but I've got a level of confidence in being part of the engineering world that has really helped me a lot, being able to be successful. And I'm not reticent about sharing my opinion either. So that certainly has a lot to do with making sure that people know that I'm not going to sit back and just listen. I'm going to, if I have an opinion or have an idea about the way things should go, I'm going to share that.
I have this hypothesis because, like you, I've always felt, as I continue to evolve in my career, I just feel confident in what I do, and I don't look at my gender, my ethnicity. I look at me as being capable, competent, and I can count on my hands anything I remember to be remotely sexist, racist, or whatever. So my hypothesis is those of us who feel confident in our own skin exude that confidence, and so people respect you. So they don't even treat you in a different way because they see you almost as an equal. Well, I shouldn't say almost. They see you as an equal because you see yourself as an equal. So that's my hypothesis. If anybody wants to do that research, welcome to it. But it's also my feeling a gift to people is that you need to be confident in who you are, because when you do that, you are an equal. You are seen as an equal, and you'll be treated like an equal. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's how I feel.
I have had the same experience, a very similar experience,
Yeah.
where I don't let my gender hold me back from participating and being confident about who I am. And I am who I am, and I'm not, I'm not afraid to be part of the room and be on equal footing to everybody else in the
I love
room.
you say part of the room. Is there some tips and strategies that you could share with women who are, saying, wow, I want to be like Joanna? How did she do that? Can you give some of our listeners and viewers some strategies on, or your experiences, some other experiences that will help them continue to gain confidence in who they are?
So a couple of things. One of them, I think, really uh, gave me an incredible boost in confidence, and that was getting involved in a professional organization when I was a consultant. I got on to a local chapter of a professional organization. I really enjoyed the people.
Was this the
Tremendous.
CITE or was it?
Yes, this was
Okay.
CITE. This was in Toronto. So there was a Toronto chapter, and I got involved in it. And my boss at the time really supported me being involved. So, we had uh, lunches every couple of weeks and stuffed newsletters into envelopes, which we mailed.
And how
Way
old would you be at that point, Joanna?
so,
Because I think people
yeah.
should get involved, but give them an idea of your age at that time.
So I think I was about 25, 26. I mean,
It's
I
very
was
young.
relatively early out of school. And I kept up the involvement over the next, I'd say probably the next 6 or 7 years at the local level. And then my boss at my second consulting firm was heavily involved in the organization nationally. And he said to me, he said, I think you should run for the internet for the Canadian board. And he said, if you want to do that, I'll totally support it. I'm quite happy to do that. And I never even really thought about it. But when he said that, I thought, wow, that would be really amazing. And I'd get to meet all these people from across Canada, and I'd be able to really broaden my horizons. So I ran for the Canadian board and I won. So I ended up on the Canadian board for 6 years,
Wow.
moving up the ranks from the secretary, treasurer to the vice president to the president. And I became the first woman president of the organization.
What a
And
milestone.
I never even thought about it when I ran for the board until I showed up at the first board meeting. And I will tell you, the fellows on the board that I was on the board with, they were the most welcoming people. I am still friends with them 25 years later. Like, I still keep in touch with them. We connect all the time. But they were really, really wonderful. And they said to me, they said, well, I think our first meeting was out in Vancouver, and they said to me, well, we normally will go out to a bar and watch hockey after our board meetings. Is that okay? And I laughed. I said, I'm a hockey fan. That's completely fine with me. But thank you for asking. Right? Thank you for
Yeah,
asking.
yeah.
They never had a woman on the board. And so it was really terrific, and I developed these amazing friendships with all of these men, and I've seen so many women come up through the ranks now, who've gone up to the Canadian president, and it makes me feel so great that I was the first one, that I was sort of in the lead, but they followed the same path.
Did you
But
ever
I
think as a woman that you would be a pioneer of something for women?
never thought about it. Never really thought about it, but it was great. And I did make the point of making sure that women who were coming to the conferences, who were coming to up through the district, the chapters, I made sure they felt really welcome. And I made a point of visiting every chapter across Canada when I was president. And then I got elected to the international board. after that. And I was the international director for Canada on the international board, and I was able to meet again a really wide range of other people from across the world on that board. And again, I was the first Canadian woman president or Canadian woman director. But there have been plenty of others since then. And that gave all of those steps through the different levels within the organization all gave me such an ability to develop my leadership skills and to really figure out what was important and to really figure out visions for where the organization was going to go and really have a voice. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and I've been a member of the organization since 1985.
Wow.
It's a long time, but it's still a very relevant organization, and it's changed dramatically over the years, but in very good ways. So I would recommend to anyone, if you're really wanting to, take your career to the next level, to develop leadership skills, to network and get to know people from lots of different walks of life and different areas in your field, there's nothing better. And in addition to that, so that's my ITE story, but I also am a member of some other professional organizations. And through those organizations, I've developed a network of women trusted advisors. And they are some amazing, amazing women who I can go to if I'm struggling with a decision about my career or I want some advice about a particular thing that's going on. These are women I can go to, and they're my board of advisors. And there's nothing better. I wish I had that when I was younger. And I very much encourage younger women to develop those trusted advisors over their career, because they will help give you a different perspective on your decisions.
I think it's so important for us to recognize our community and as you say, trusted advisors in the community. So my husband and I I didn't own it, but my husband and I built iTrans Consulting and Engineering firm, as you well know, Joanna. And I remember I was in my career as a healthcare professional and was a director of nursing at the time, because that person said, "I think you're ready for a director role." And sure enough, I was. And I went back to school and I was thinking, oh, what am I going to do with my newfound master's? I was thinking CEO of a hospital kind of thing. And Tyrone said, oh, I'm thinking of starting a company. And after a year, it was so successful, I decided that I would move over. And I remember talking to my trusted advisor, somebody I'd known since my 20s. And I said, Diane, the job I really liked the best was when I was manager of ICU CCU at Mount Sinai. And I proceeded to say everything I liked about that. Oh, I get to hire my own staff. I ensure the quality. And then I said, wait a minute, that's what I'm going to be doing at iTrans. I'm just doing it in engineering. And with that conversation, with her support, I never looked back. I never said, oh, well, I gave up this career to be with my husband. No, I extended my role opportunities to take what I'd learned and then apply it to a different setting. And it grew, and it was just such a wonderful experience for me and my husband to grow this company. So I understand, we get opportunities and we make the most of it. And I think people are just wowing at your career now when you talk about international CITE or ITE. It's not CITE, it's ITE at the international level. Is there any advice that you would give to women in terms of leadership style?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And, I did an event for women at Crosslinx a couple of months ago. And one of the things that I had the same thought, what would I advise some of these up and coming women leaders in our organization? And one of the things that I said to them was, not every leader has the same style.
Exactly.
But you need to know what your own strengths and values are so that you can develop your leadership style around that. And I said self-awareness is a really big part of it. And for me, my my integrity is a huge deal for me. So my values are being honest and forthright and not hiding things. I think it's incredibly valued so that I can be a trusted person, regardless of what situation I'm in. I'm not a pushover. The best description I ever had applied to me came from somebody who I felt was a really, really difficult negotiator. And I found out not from him directly, but from somebody who knew him very well. And he said that he thought that I was tough but fair. I thought, I like that. I really like that, because that's for a woman to be tough is fine, but it can also have a lot of negative connotations. But
Exactly.
to have the fair attached to it was really important to me.
Yeah.
And it made me feel like, okay, yeah, that's a good way to describe me, and I own that. But everyone has um, their own values around how do they want to present themselves, and what do they want to be known for, and gaining that self-awareness, sometimes from your trusted advisors, sometimes from feedback from somebody outside of your circle, can actually be really, really helpful, and can really be instructional and tell you a lot about what your leadership skills are going to be.
I think the more people understand who they are, that self-awareness piece, and discover what makes them unique, what makes them shine. And like uniqueness is part of my rev up process. And one of the things I do to help people discover their uniqueness is Fascination Advantage. It's an assessment tool that looks at how the world sees you and validates how the world sees you. You don't have to be like somebody who is an authoritarian, shows you how to do things by the book, and that's not your style. No, discover who you are and own who you are, and you're going to be confident and capable. I know we've talked about a lot of good things, and people will say, oh, well, there's nothing, there's all good stuff. But can you share with us then a struggle or a moment that really you felt there was adversity and you had to find your way out of it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you asked me that, Hilda, because there's been a couple of really big struggles in my life. Like nobody's life is perfect and without struggle. There obviously personal struggles. I lost both my parents to cancer about 8 years apart, and it was really, really difficult. I mean, losing a parent is hard no matter what. But losing both parents like that is really, really difficult. But I had so many people around me who supported me going through that. It was really amazing. You find out who your supports really are when something like that happens. But on the personal front, I was front and center in a very controversial project in Toronto. Anybody who was following transit in the mid 2000s certainly heard about the St. Clair streetcar line and
Yes.
all the controversy around it. Well, I was the project manager for the city of Toronto, but on the planning study for that particular project, and that was a year and a half of unbelievable levels of criticism and conflict with particular people in the community. Lots of controversy at city council. We had 53 public meetings in 1 year.
Wow. Wow.
It was unbelievable.
If I can help people who are listening kind of understand, I remember listening on the radio most of the time about this St. Clair line, and a lot about people's whose livelihoods were disrupted because their stores were really struggling. Nobody would go into the shops, and there was a lot of media attention, a lot of anger about that.
There was, but that was during construction. I was on the front end. And so before we even
Oh,
got
even
into
before then.
construction, there was so much controversy. And it was the first time that I dealt with the media. I mean, as a consultant, you never get in front of the media. Like, it just doesn't really happen very often, if at all. So I was now being put in front of the media to answer questions at public meetings. There were cameras in almost every single public meeting we had. And I had to get media training and deal with really angry, really angry people who were, in a lot of ways, really fearful of a change.
Mm.
And it I had a lot of empathy for this fear of change. Everyone is afraid of things changing in their lives. You may have enough stress in your life and you don't need one more thing changing. Um, but it was surprising the level of vehemence and the level of anger and animosity. And I'd never experienced anything quite like it ever before on a project that I worked on. So, but it got personal, and that's what really gave me a lot of heartache. Was it that it did get personal, and I was subject to personal attacks, not just by the community, but by a city councilor.
Wow.
And it was in public. So it was really difficult to sort of stay the course and say, this is an important project for the city. It's an important project for this community. The naysayers are eventually going to be proven wrong, that it was the right thing to do. But it was really difficult. It really made me question: Are we really doing the right thing here? And it really made me question the role of sort of engineers like me in the city, and what is our role, and how far does that go? How far do we take it?
Yeah.
And how far do you go when you're trying to make improvements that maybe not all the members of the community agree with? It was really tough, and and of course there's all the political turmoil happening around this particular project as well. It really divided city council. David Miller was the mayor. He was unbelievably supportive, which is the only reason that the project ever got approved. But the scrutiny was excruciating at points in time. So it really affected me. It really did. It made me very sensitive to how you present information to a community, all the things that you think about before you even go in front of a community group. We really have to have almost every single possible question answered before you even go. But even then, it doesn't matter. You're still going to have a lot of criticism. So it was really difficult. I think that was the most difficult project I ever worked on.
It sounds to me like just a stressful situation to be in, on a project where you're learning, and a little bit of social media is one thing, but this was like a bombardment for such a long time for a novice in this arena. Wow.
It was really challenging. Now I'll tell you a funny little story.
There's a funny story now.
There isn't a funny, it was quite funny. And I actually tell it I've told it quite often. My oldest son was 10 when, I think he was 10, something around there, when we were doing a lot of the public meetings. And there was one evening where, for some reason, he ended up coming with me to a public meeting. So he sat in the back of the public meeting, playing with his Game Boy in the back, and it was one of the more contentious meetings that were held. The meeting wrapped up, and I was talking to a few people, and he came up and was standing beside me, and I was talking to an MPP's assistant, and she looked. I introduced him to her, and she said, "So, what did you think? What did you think of all of this?" And he looked at her and he said, "They were really mean to my mom." I thought, wow. He was pretty blunt. And she was really taken aback. But I thought, good for you.
So did you
Because
give
it
him
was pretty ugly.
ice
It was
cream cone or $5
it
for
was
thanks for that,
funny.
son?
Oh my gosh, it was very funny.
But he was
Um,
honest.
but he felt the
Yeah,
animosity,
yeah.
right? And he
But
felt it
fortunately, he
directed
was
at me.
diplomatic enough not to go up and say, "Don't you act like this to my mom,"
Oh, it's too funny.
because you
Well,
probably would have got a shade of red if he did that.
I didn't even think he was really paying attention, but
Yeah,
he
he
was.
probably could
We
feel
were.
the
Oh yeah,
intensity of the
yeah.
yeah, because
So he'd be a
those
pretty
meetings
good
can be
sport.
pretty tough. And you said you did 53 of them because it's like it's that NIMBY, not in my backyard, and you've got so many passionate people who don't want it in their backyard.
That's right. And trying to keep, keep a very professional manner and responding to all the questions, some
Yeah.
of which are way off base or just don't even make a whole lot of sense in some cases. And it's very, very stressful and requires an enormous amount of energy to deal with.
Right, right.
So
I mean,
it was a very tough,
it,
it was
it
a really
really
tough year.
is conciliatory training. It's learning how to de-escalate a situation, to stay neutral, to give the facts, to be prepared for everything that might be possibly asked, and be diplomatic and respectful about that. That's like chewing gum and rubbing your tummy and twirling around all at the same time, kind of.
Yeah, it is a real juggling act for sure. So,
Well,
tough, tough stuff.
see,
And
that's why they said you like, what are you waiting for? Like you're telling these stories, and these were your proving grounds of how you were capable and accomplished. I mean, we could talk all day,
I'm
but
sure we
and
could.
I loved what you've shared with us. Like, what kind of advice do you want to give to listeners as we're wrapping up here?
So I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got was from this woman who said, "What are you waiting for?" If you are presented with an opportunity that maybe scares you a little bit or it challenges you to say, I'm not, is that what I want to do? I'm not sure if that's really in my skill set. Really think about it carefully before you say no, because you never know where that path is going to take you.
And you've shown throughout by sharing your career how all these little things have led to more and more interesting opportunities for you for your career and your lifetime. What's next for you, Joanna?
Well, I've been doing a little bit of thinking about that because two multi-billion-dollar projects in a row is a lot, and that's what I'm hoping to finish this year, if at all possible. Um, but one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I've been thinking about this for a while since I finished the subway project, is I'd like to write a book about my experiences in these big transformative city building projects. And I think I have there's a lot of great stories around these projects. There's a lot of learning we can take away from these projects, and really, I think really providing an insight into why these take so long and why they're so complex and there's so much involved that the average person really doesn't know what it takes to get them done. And I think there's so much rhetoric out there about, oh, well, it's always delayed, it's always behind schedule. These projects are never done on time, they're never done on budget. Um, but I think if people really understood what goes on behind the scenes, there might be a little bit more understanding of why that can happen. Um, but the end product is really what matters and really what helps build a city. So that's kind of my next thought about where I want to go.
Well, you've had some pioneering milestones, uh, first woman president of the CITE, Canadian Institute of Technological Engineering. No, I got it wrong.
Transportation engineering.
Transportation engineering, right. Wrong field. And then to become the first female president of the ITE, which is the international version of that. And then these two legacy projects. As you ride the subways, or as your grandchildren ride the subways, they can say, and the LRT, they can say, Grandma helped build this, or great grandma helped build this. So now I'm really going to age you past your prime. Thank you, Joanne, for sharing your experience and helping give some inspiration and some tips and strategies for women and others who are thinking, how do I progress my career? What do I want my career to be? So really appreciate you coming on today. Tell us how people can get a hold of you.
Well, I have to say, Hilda, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's so easy to talk to you, and it's so wonderful to sort of think about sort of my career in its totality today. It's been really lovely. So people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have a profile there. I'm also on Twitter, JMS Kerr, JMSKER. And then I'm also on Instagram, and I post pictures of the transit projects that I'm working on. So you can reach me at Joanna Kervin on Instagram. So any of those venues, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. And I thank my listeners and my viewers. Joanna's a fascinating, wonderful individual, and I'm glad that we could spend the time sharing her accomplishments. If you liked what you heard, give it the thumbs up. And if you are interested in hearing more about interesting people that come on my show, we all have a story to tell, and I think you learn from hearing stories of others to inspire you and to make you not feel alone, because maybe you've had an experience just like that person. So give it a thumbs up. Follow us, subscribe, and I'll see you or hear you on the next show. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date on our latest episodes. For HR tips, news, and strategies, or if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.